My name's Peter Allan. We've been farming up on the top of the Glenure Hill in the top corner of central northern Southland for 35 odd years. We purchased this property that was totally a sheep farm, and we've slowly transformed it into a deer farm. But the place had a myriad of creeks and streams and tributaries, and we've slowly worked towards fencing everything off to try and keep the deer out of all the waterways. We never had any trees on the property at all, so every tree lane we've just started from scratch. Not everything has grown the first time, and we have shifted some other ones, just like we've shifted fences, but that's just ongoing for most farmers. So we're all deer on this property, and finding out at this altitude, bearing in mind we're about 1400 feet or 380 metres above the sea level, finding out what would grow and what we liked and what we started with 30 years ago is nothing like what we would start with now. So I'll just explain that a little bit further. We started off planting eucalypts, nitens, and I was asked before if I'd do that again. Well, no, some of those early ones would probably have to come out, and what we would plant now is probably a lot more natives. But we've also got to realise that what we can get now in trees we couldn't buy back then, or couldn't source I should say. Leylandii cypress have been a good tree, Androscoggin poplars, really good. The only problem is the bigger the tree, the bigger the root system, and now we're incurring a lot of major root problems with drainage every year. We're putting in a lot more trees for bees and trees for deer that deer can eat, and 3 years ago we put in these Kanugiaka Japanese fodder willows. We wouldn't use the Nightingale eucalypts again. They're just too messy, far too messy. Like the branches that fall off them are horrible hard sticks that you can't mow. They get in your tyres. The leaves aren't so bad because the deer will eat the leaves. And as you can see, we've planted a Kanugiaka willow, a Japanese fodder willow. The idea of that is to have it closer to the fence where the deer can actually browse, graze it as they get bigger. So they'll keep it trimmed through the fence, so there won't be any need to trim these particular willows. But this is there is about 8 little creeks and tributaries that come onto our property, and this one here flows all year round, so it's good clean water with a good gravel bottom, and deer didn't bother it, but because it was close to a fence, once the deer were put under pressure they did get in it, so it was one of the easiest ones to fence off. Deer won't actually wallow in a creek like this with beautiful flowing water that's got a gravel bottom. Gravel or rock bottom, they don't touch it, and you can have a good mob of deer around here and they'll just step over it. But if this had a muddy bottom, or even side springs coming in that had mud and still water, they'll wallow in it. But deer will only wallow this time of the year, in particular during the roar, to cool down. The stags do it just to scent mark everything. Deer will wallow mostly in September, October, and that's to get rid of their winter coat. We had a couple of days last week that hit 30 degrees, and all the hinds and even the fawns were finding a mud patch somewhere just to cool down. Standing next to a good stand of Androscoggin poplars. Androscoggin, I always thought it was a Scottish name, but apparently it's Norwegian origin, and they actually use it in household furniture in Norway. They've got wonderfully big leaves on them, and obviously deciduous, shed them in the winter time, but the hinds tend to clean all the leaves up over a period of 2 or 3 weeks after they've all fallen off. They are fantastic for shade for stags during velveting through all the summer months. These have been planted a little bit closer together, and I actually thought that they were too close together, but maybe they are about the right spacing to mitigate the size of the trunks and the leaves. But shade is actually more important for deer than what shelter is in the winter time. And I'll just briefly explain that they have a very good winter coat, and don't tend to seek shelter as much during the winter as what they would seek shade during the summer months. So we're finding that these are really good shade trees. Sitting at a vantage point here, looking back towards the house, and where possible on the farm, we've tried to plant the deciduous trees, namely the Androscoggin poplars, on east-west tree lanes, but it hasn't always worked out. And also where possible, the Leylandii cypress on north-south facing. And below me there's a big stand of Douglas fir trees that we planted some 15-18 years ago now. There's about 2,500 of those that we spaded in, and it was a cold south-facing clay face that had quite a distance between that and the creek, and it was always going to be difficult to fence off. And even when we had sheep some 30 years ago, they were starting to track around the face, so we fenced it off, and it's enhanced the whole place. We put poplars around a big pond at the bottom end of it, but most of the Douglas firs have grown very well. Well, here we are up against a native tree shelter belt. We planted these for probably 2 of 3 reasons. A, for aestheticness. We always wanted to plant natives around. They don't always grow where you want them to. We put in a combination of broadleaf, pittosporum and O'Learia in this one, and a little bit slower growing, but as you can see, a lot of them are over 3 meters high now, and that's probably an ideal height. The advantage with them is that the deer will keep them trimmed on the outside, but we won't have to use any other trimming or pruning for them, and we just like the look of them. And there was good soil in here to put them in, so most of them have grown, and as I say, slow, but they're away. It's been a labour of love to plant and fence all the creeks off over a period of 30 years. I mean, Rome wasn't built in a day, as we all know. It's been slow, but we've just, like a lot of people that never know where to start with riparian fencing, I guess my advice is start on your most prone and your most affected areas and just chip away slowly, and that's what we've done. And in the main, the animals have benefited greatly with the trees that we've planted over the years, particularly with the shade and shelter, and I emphasise more the shade than anything really.